I'm live. I'm so sorry about that. Like I said, I'm new to this. This is my first time of live streaming, and yesterday I just went live. But then I said, let me schedule it so that I will not be late. Now I'm like 3 minutes late, looking for where I was going to go live. So this is what's going to happen. Tomorrow, I'm going to try this again. I hope it's smoother. I'll still schedule the live streaming, and then hopefully I will know where to click, because right now I don't even know what I clicked on, and I'm live. So anyway, welcome back. My name is Simisola Ogoyinka, and I promised myself I'm going to give us one tea each time I come here. So I was just thinking about it. I was mentored at some point for a period of 4 years by Jerry B. Jenkins, and he said something. He said, "Keep writing." He said a lot of things anyway, but one of the things that Jerry B. Jenkins said while I was under his mentorship was to keep writing. He said, "Keep writing." He said, because you don't know which of your books would succeed. And he co-authored the Left Behind series, and when he co-authored Left Behind series, he didn't know. He said he didn't know it was going to do so well. That book went on to sell millions and millions of copies. That book went on to become a movie series and things like that. And he said the lesson he learned from that experience was just to keep writing what you have to write. Um, so that's my tea for today. Let me recap that little tea again so that I can compose myself better. So Jerry B. Jenkins mentored me for a few years, and one of the things he said during that period that I held on to was to keep writing. As a writer, keep writing. He co-authored the Left Behind series, and he said he didn't know the book was going to do so well. He was just writing, and he was just doing what he loved, doing it to the best of his knowledge. And that book went on to sell millions and millions of copies. It became a movie series and all that. So from Jerry B. Jenkins to me, and me to you, if you're a writer, keep writing. For me, my writing helped me to file for my green card, and I was approved. I was granted a national waiver, and see me here. I'm still writing. And also, when you keep writing, putting your mind to it, one day it is going to succeed. Even the Bible says that sow in the morning, sow in the evening, because you don't know which one is going to germinate well. So let's get back to what we are here for. We're reading Scent of Water, a book written by moi, Simisola Ogoyinka. I get very dry easily, so today I have just my cold water, and I have my bottle of water here to refill. So if you're ready, let's get to it. Let's get to it. Yesterday we read chapters 1 to 5, and today we are resuming chapter 6. Esam turned in front of the mirror to examine her backside. She had to make sure it was well concealed. She wasn't going to make the same mistake she had made last month. The flared floral skirts concealed the heavy curves satisfactorily. Her friends had told her often to ensure her hips and buttocks. After all, you are more endowed than Jennifer Lopez, and she's insured hers, they teased. Esam could never deny that she was that shapely, just that she never put her mind to it. She picked a plain yellow blouse over the skirt and wore it quickly. She had spent the previous month preparing herself for this visit. Now she knew what her nameless prison ward could be up to. She had done her homework. Her now much grown hair was smoothed back and tied with a ruffle into a small bun. She wore simple gold accessories and applied her usual light makeup. She was set for the day. The August rain break had given way for September's vengeance, and the clouds were gathering for what Esam suspected could be days of downpour. Contrary to the weather, Esam was in high spirit. When the prisoner was brought in, part of the spirit left her for two reasons. The first was his demeanor. There was an angry scowl on his face, and his body moved rigidly toward her as though he was being prodded forward. The second was the state in which he was physically. His over 6 feet frame swayed slightly as though from fatigue, and he looked thinner. His prison uniform looked more tattered than the previous times. Esam's heart bled. I told you not to come here again, he breathed, though in his heart he had longed for her, almost prayed even. It had been 1 month and he had counted the days. Good morning, she greeted sweetly, standing up to greet him. We didn't quite finish our discussion last month, she said. He sat heavily and she followed suit. Then why didn't you come the following day? He asked mockingly. I have monthly visitation rights since I'm not part of your immediate family, she explained. I wonder what lies you told them to give you any rights at all, he attacked. No lies, sir. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what. Let me have some water. I don't know what's in my throat. Sorry. If it wasn't live now, I would edit. Sorry. Okay. I have monthly visitation rights since I'm not part of your immediate family, she explained. I wonder what lies you told them to give you any rights at all, he attacked. No lies, sir, she smiled. It was just the favor of God. Spare me, he said. You look weak. Are you all right? Take a bed here for 1 week and I'll ask you if you're all right afterwards, he replied saucily. How long have you been here? She asked gingerly. 3 years, he replied, surprising her. I'm sorry, she said quietly. She meant it. For what? He groaned. I deserve everything I got. Could have been worse. She wondered at his cooperative attitude. He didn't seem interested in talking about her today or protecting information about himself. Perhaps it was due to his illness, for she was quite sure he was ill. She decided to press her luck. You didn't tell me your name. Michael Dabi. He put his head down on the rough table and held it with his hands. Are you having headache? He nodded. I brought some more drugs for you, vitamins and such. I'm sure I put some pain relieving tabs there too. The chief warden took custody of all, she offered. The chief warden, ha! He looked up. I'll make sure it gets to you before I go. He did not respond. How long have you got here? 15 years minimum. He looked into her eyes for the first time, and failing to hide her shock, she sucked in her breath. 15 to life. He said it as a joke and burst into laughter. She began to tremble. Do you now see why you should stare, Claire? I am a killer. He laughed hysterically. Cut it out, Dabi. The warden yelled at him from across the room, but he didn't pay any attention to him. God loves you and can save you and forgive you of every sin, she said. Damn God, damn you, he said softly and dangerously, cutting off the hysterics abruptly. God is not in my agenda, and neither am I in his. You are in God's agenda. I know. That's why he sent me to you. He wants to deliver you. Who do you think you are? He stood up slowly, glaring at her. I saw you in my dream. God revealed you to me. He wants to help you. He loves you, she said, pleadingly looking at him. Stop it, he screamed, covering his ears. I don't want to hear about your God. Sit down, 1106. The warden stood up and started toward them. Get out of here before I kill you, and don't ever come back. Mike banged on the table. The warden reached him and slapped handcuffs on his wrists, pushing him away. Please, please give God a chance. Esam broke down and wept as the prisoner was led away. She pulled herself together and stood up, sniffing and cleaning off her tears with the back of her hand. Why did her sessions with him always end up awry? At the gate office, she asked to see the chief warden, a rotund man in his late 50s. He had sprinkles of gray hair, a cultured mustache, and a smiley face he tried to keep stern always. Sir, I wanted to discuss the drugs I brought for Michael Dabi, CM1106, with you. His condition today seemed a little bad, and I was wondering, the prison has a sick bay for inmates, Dr. Bassey. He broke in sternly. And all sick inmates are treated by the sick bay, he said. The clouds gave in to the pressure of rain, and heavens opened up in heavy torrents. Esam felt as though the storm was forming inside her, threatening to manifest so much like the weather. I don't think Michael has been treated, she replied, feeling a strange joy as she mentioned his name. Dr. Bassey, the man said with strained patience, if CM1106 has not been treated, it is really no concern of yours. Even relations have no say in the treatment of inmates here. As long as they are under our custody, it is our responsibility to take care of them. Besides, the fact that I am not, besides, he continued with a note of deference. CM1106 is not worth the trouble. After all, he has blood on his hands. He is as guilty as that is no reason why he should not be treated properly and as needed. Esam caught him, appalled. The devil. The warden continued as though she had not even spoken. What baffles me is why you should take so much interest. Apart from a letter or two, Dabi has been left alone. And if his family can take that discretion, I think you should. God expects us to reach out to as many souls as we can, Esam said soberly. Even God does not expect a woman like you to reach out to a hardened, ruthless criminal like Dabi. That's why I was reluctant to give you the visitation permit in the first place. It is enough that your church holds weekly services with the prisoners, though Dabi stays away. What did he do exactly? Esam prompted, hoping the warden will sing. He killed two people in a drunken rage, the warden said with spite. Esam gasped. One of them was his own young son. The man is mad, the warden explained, satisfied at Esam's gone pale face. Sir, she stuttered, go home. You have no business with the likes of Michael Dabi. He wiped off imaginary sweat from his face with a blue handkerchief. Thank you. She struggled to her feet and left the office, the storm inside her bursting. All the way home, Esam cried. She cried and cried and cried and wondered why. But one thing stuck, and it scared her. If he had killed his own son in a rage, then nothing would stop him from killing her if he had the chance. Chapter 7. Mike tossed and turned and woke up with a start. He was sweating profusely. Thunder struck outside, and cold wind blew in from the high cell window, a small square space that was barred with iron. On hot nights, sleep was difficult and ventilation was disastrous. But Mike realized he couldn't sleep despite the cool air coming in. Stinking body odor he hadn't been able to get used to in 3.5 years oozed to his nostrils, coupled with the stench of urine and prison and other unidentifiable odors. Someone snored like the croaking of a toad. Mosquitoes hummed around him. Through the nasty smells and sounds around him, Mike's heart went to his latest thought, Esam Bassey. It was already 3 months since she last came. He had succeeded in chasing her away, yet it was as though a part of him had gone too. What was it about her that kept him glued? Just 3 visits, and he saw her face all the time, even remembered the sweet smell of her. He knew he'd been unfair. Each time she visited, he had succeeded in reducing her to tears. But what was that to him? She was a complete stranger. He hardly knew anything about her apart from what she'd told him, and she knew absolutely nothing about him. He didn't dare let her know the full of it. Anyway, if she was so concerned for him, why had she disappeared just because he told her he had killed? If her God was as fantastic as she claimed, where was he? Where had he been all the years? He covered his face with his hands and struggled to push the thoughts away. They were too painful. His mind wandered back to the beautiful stranger in his life. He had to admit, even to himself, that he had missed her deeply. And her not showing up now had succeeded in hardening his heart more against her and against God. He'd stood outside by the entrance of his cell to watch her church members celebrate the Christmas party with the inmates. He wouldn't join them, but he'd searched every face for hers. Not that he had any hopes of her ever coming back, but he hoped against hope. She had been a sweet relief from the years of silence he had suffered from everyone he knew and loved. The family Christmas get together was going on smoothly as usual. The children chattered in their corner of the large dining room, punctuated by intermittent scolding from their parents. The adults discussed the usual topics: sports, business, and the state of the country. Esam pushed the delicious main course of coconut rice, coleslaw, and roasted turkey about her plate absently. She had eaten little and spoken even less during the course of the celebration. More precisely, in the past 3 months. Over the dessert of rich fruit cake and ice cream, Amma walked over to Esam, where she was nibbling at the rich dessert quietly. This was the aspect of the meal that she overindulged in. She was an ice cream addict. Her twin sister looked at her and sat down. With dessert going underway, the family had dispersed into clutters, the men sitting and talking together in the living room, the women clearing the dishes. The children had all gone to the children's parlor to enjoy their desserts in front of the TV. While the activities continued, Esam had gone to the guest parlor to get away from it all. You hardly touched your food, she said. I wasn't very hungry, Esam replied. Twinnie, what's wrong? Amma asked. I know you, and this is not you. Oh, Amma, I am so confused. I really can't believe what is going on with me. I'd always thought I could be in control. Esam burst out, looking longingly into her sister's oval eyes. They had always been there for each other through thick and thin. Tell me, Amma encouraged simply. I had this dream about 6 months ago, just once. Esam took a deep breath and then let it out with full explanation. And with that first dream, I haven't had any other related to it, but I've been so drawn to that man. You never told me, Amma accused. How could I have? Initially, I didn't understand even myself. And by the time I decided I had to put a stop to the visits, you had traveled out of the country. And then when you came back, you always did think you could handle things all by yourself. Amma cut in gently. Her sister was so phlegmatic, contrary to her. Though identical physically, they were as different temperamentally. Amma, what puzzles me the most is the bond I feel between us. It terrified me to be so tied to this man, so burdened for him. The church went to the prisons yesterday for a Christmas outreach, and believe me, though I didn't follow them on purpose, it's as if I saw again. Are you falling in love with him? Amma teased in a characteristic way. Spare me, I couldn't fall in love with him in a century. If you see him, you understand. Besides, he's the convicted murderer and a vicious one too. So how do we help him? Amma asked. Help who? Ephraim cutting. Amma looked fondly at her husband as he came to join them and sighed. Briefly, she related Esam's tale to him and waited for his opinion. Well, Ephraim looked at Esam. How do we help him? I thought we would be talking about helping me, Esam exclaimed. It's relative, Amma replied. If he is helped, you will be free. Hold on, Ephraim said suddenly. If he's in if he's in for 15 years, then it's not two count murder. He reasoned, looking at the two women. He may have had good lawyers, his wife contested, thinking. Murder is punishable by death in Nigeria. One is enough to send him to the firing squad. Two, and with a child involved, forget it. Ephraim shook his head. He did tell me his sentence could have been worse. Esam said, something does not seem right to me, Ephraim insisted. Did he give you details? No way. He was always angry and impatient with me. Upset. Let's visit him. I don't think I want to go back there. Esam shook her head vehemently. We'll go together, Ephraim offered. They'll only allow me to bring one other person, Esam said. We'll both go, Amma said, squeezing her sister's hand in assurance. I will follow you in my capacity as a lawyer, Ephraim declared. I have to be sure the prison authorities will. Of course, he has a right to a lawyer. The problem is if Michael Dabi will accept one from me, Esam groaned. Let's take a quick break. I also need to blow my nose and check out whatever is happening there. So don't go away, please. I will be right back. Taking a sip of water before I go. Stay with me. Sorry about that. I don't know what was going on. All right. I will just sing not single. Sip my water. Let me refill quickly. And then we can go 2 more chapters and take a break. And we'll read chapter 10. All right. Chapter 8. When the prisoner was brought in, his 3 visitors stood up in unison. His feet were shackled, his hands in cuffs in front of him, and his movement was slow and tedious. He spotted a new prison uniform, though. Those stains were already appearing in patches. His face was hard, his expression indifferent. He had succeeded in concealing his shock at seeing the guests. He studied them one by one, from the one he knew to the ones he didn't. 3 months of torture, and Esam Bassey had made a sudden reappearance. She looked as lovely as ever in a shaped red dress with a square neckline and pleated bodice. She had tried to hide her lovely figure but failed woefully. Her hair was set in a neat finger wave, curling tips falling in layers about her shoulders. He thought she was much prettier with long hair. His eyes drifted to the lady with her, and before he could control it, shot back to Esam. They looked exactly the same. And she also wore a red dress, though Esam's slim waist and flat stomach contradicted the woman's protruding stomach. He made a note of her condition and reminded himself to avoid upsetting her as much as he could. Her hair was heaped in a fringe bun on top of her head, and her face was neatly made up. The man with them wore a white half collar shirt and black trousers with black suit. When the prisoner finally stood in front of them, Esam made the introductions. His face remained blank. The other two were Effiong and Ama Offiong. Effiong motioned to the retreating warden and taking him aside expressed his displeasure. Why the chains? Effiong asked. The warden looked at him quizzically. I am his lawyer, and a convicted felon has a right to move freely under the jurisdiction of his keepers, he said. We are not aware that he has a lawyer, the warden argued. But then, the last time he was allowed to exercise his right, he became violent, the warden said. I assure you he will behave himself. You'll need a written permission from the prison controller on that one, the warden said and left before Ephraim gave him the chance to do otherwise. Well, ladies, he returned to the small group that stood waiting for him. The chains, Esam started, mean nothing, Michael Dabi beat out, his eyes as hard, as still as he held her gaze. Please, let's sit, Amma said, taking the lead. The others followed suit. Ephraim decided to head the meeting as he noticed that Amma was very nervous. Mr. Dabi, we really are grateful to God for this opportunity to meet you and to be a part of your life, he started. Mike agitated the heavy locks binding his wrists with one hand, thereby creating a strange rhythm. He stayed his gaze on Esam to intimidate, but more to admire and to assimilate. As Esam said earlier, we have come as friends and to help. Ephraim continued. Get to your point, Your Honor, Mike growled mockingly. How did you know he's a lawyer? Esam's eyes widened. The warden just said so, he replied in mock timidity. Didn't you just hear? Indeed, your ears are sharp, Amma sighed dryly. He turned on her and raked her with steely eyes. Well, I don't need a lawyer. Really, I don't know what all this sudden interest is in me. I am here for my sins. I am not awaiting trial. I really don't have time for this, he moaned, making to stand up. Don't go, please. Esam jumped to her feet nervously. Three pairs of eyes turned to her and heat poured into her face. She sat down shakily, embarrassed. What do you want with me, woman? Mike asked. For the first time, Esam noticed a genuine concern in his voice, and she pondered the question herself for the millionth time. We want to help you, Amma chimed softly. We believe God has a purpose for your life, and we want to help you discover it. Even in prison, his tone softened. Even in prison, the three chorused. What purpose could there remain for such a shattered life? The purpose was fulfilled before here. He stood up slowly, painfully. If there's a hereafter, we can look for another purpose. Right now, he looked at their faces each. Jonah is in the belly of a very big fish, he sighed. A deep sorrow was etched in his voice, and Esam muttered a word of prayer in thanksgiving. He was finally showing some emotion. I guess this is the dawning of Jonah's third day then. Amma resounded, studying Mike. She had not been shocked when she saw him. She'd had several encounters with prisoners, but she had to admit that there seemed more to this one than meets the eye. He looked at Amma for a brief moment and turned away, as though trying to decide whether or not to leave. We want to reopen your case file, Ephraim said suddenly, making the prisoner turn sharply to look at him. Suddenly, he burst into laughter and rested his gaze on Esam. There is no need. I committed the crime. I am blessed to be alive today. Each word was spoken with venom. If you murdered two people, you will be dead by the hangman, Ephraim said. Well, then, I didn't murder two people. The gaze remained intent on a pale face. What were your charges? Voluntary manslaughter, 2 counts. The current continued to flow from his hardened face to her ashen face. 15 to life, Ephraim sighed. I got the maximum penalty. The 5-year old was one of the victims, Mike said, and turned from them abruptly. Enough for one day. He started toward the door, ignoring the scoring of the warden in the hall. Esam swallowed hard. She thought she had seen the glint of tears before he turned. It must have been his son he talked about. We will reopen the case. I'll see you next week, Ephraim called after him. Save your breath, he shouted back and disappeared out of the room. He's impossible, Esam said, close to tears. What do you mean to do, dear? Amma asked, gently resting her slender hand on her husband's. I don't know. Let's get out of here, Ephraim replied and sighed. In the car, Esam expressed her fears. I don't think he can get a better trial. I think we should just focus on getting him saved, she said. Esam is right. The way I see it, the case is closed. Amma agreed. We can't be sure till we see the case filed. My only fear is that it is in federal jurisdiction. If the crime was committed in the States, I would have learned about it. I mean, I can count the number of criminal lawyers in these states, Ephraim joked. You're right. I bet it is a federal case. That means you spend a fortune in time and in cash just to reopen the case and then discover you can do nothing about it. It is a hopeless case. Amma dismissed. Chapter 9. Mike sat on his bed and looked to the corner of the room where the deep sobs were coming from. The boy had wept continuously for 4 days now, and it was beginning to get to Mike. The other prisoners, after giving him the usual welcome party, had realized their mistake and let the boy alone, except, of course, for one of the fags who'd forcefully had his way with him several times. Fresh meat, they called him. It was sickening. Mike remembered when he first got in. There had been similar attempts until the day he freed himself by fighting back. The fags had let him be after that. Let up, boy, he growled into the darkness, and the sobs paused. He hadn't meant to sound so harsh. He could see the outline of the broken youth and knew the boy was staring back at him, no doubt startled. He had kept to himself, as usual, since the boy arrived 4 days earlier. He didn't blame the lad for being in such poor spirits. He could never forget how he had felt when he was first brought in. The only difference was that he hadn't wept at all. He could have, if his mother had visited as soon as he was locked up, like this boy's mother had. He had been saved that heartache, ironically, because his parents had both slumped on the day of the verdict. His mother had survived the stroke, which he learned from her letter written to him almost a year after. His dad had not. He dragged his thoughts away from the past. It was too painful to ponder on. He'd better not think he had a past or a future. The present was sufficient for its troubles. Crying won't end your troubles, he said more gently. Goodness, the boy couldn't be more than 15. It was so painful to see juveniles locked up with adults. What a country. He drifted briefly. What's your name? How old are you? He pressed on as gently as he could. Everyone could use a little kindness in their type of world. I'm Ekpeyong, I'm 14, the boy whispered. What did you do and how long are you going to be here? Mike pressed. Ekpeyong burst into tears and cried until Mike's patience ran out. Look, Crying will do nothing for you. Well, maybe I should leave you to your tears, but talking about it helps. Look, I need to sleep and you have to keep quiet. Mike groaned when the boy continued. 14, he thought, alarmed. I have no lawyer. I did not commit the offense. I was in the farm working. I did not kill anybody. Oh God. Oh Abasi. The boy sobbed. Oh blast. Mike saw under his breath. Another bad case. Two words struck a bell. Fam and no. A peasant with no lawyer, one of two things will happen. Either the boy rots in jail or the case rounds up quickly and the boy ends up in the hangman's noose. It was no use saying anything to the lad. He couldn't help anyway, or could he? He thought of the lawyer that had pestered him for almost 4 months now with no luck. What irony. Maybe he could talk to Offiong into taking the lad's case, do something good for someone at least. I have a lawyer. He should be here next week. I'll talk to him about you, Mike said, feeling elation. You will? Oga, you will? The boy shrieked. I will, Mike replied, laughter in his voice. When the prisoner was brought, though without chains, he looked weak and worn. Ephraim had come with Esam, who had stopped visiting previously. He had told her that if Mike did not cooperate one last time, he would leave him for good. She was dressed in a red checkered blouse over a flared denim skirt, her face lightly made up. Mike's heart flipped a bit. She always had the same effect on him, especially now that he had not seen her in almost 4 months. He had not forgotten what she did to him. Ephraim was dressed in his usual black trousers and white shirt. Is there any way you can defend a young boy convicted of murder? Mike asked heavily as he took his seat opposite his visitors. He had not even remembered to greet them. Good morning, Mike. Seems you want to talk today, Ephraim said lightly. How are you? Esam asked, eager to know. The boy is in desperate need. Mike looked from one to the other. They glared back at him, amazed at the intensity in his attitude. Look, you've asked to help me so much. Now is the time, he said desperately. Well, where is the boy and who is he? His name is Ekpeyoung. He's just 14, already convicted for murder. He was suddenly taken away yesterday to Ecom prison. Something about the crime's location being Akbarabon. He has no legal representation. He and his parents are poor farmers. He said he didn't commit the crime, and I believe him. Mike blotted out. This is ridiculous. I can't believe. I promised him you would help. What about you? Are you going to tell me your story before sending me on the way to Ecom? Efion was suddenly disgusted with Mike. Who did he think he was? I don't need a lawyer. This small boy does, Mike said forcefully. Who paid for the service? Efion asked. Who would have paid for mine? Dr. Bassey, Efion replied out of the blue, stunning the tensed Esam. Well, Mike turned to her. Will you please do this for me? I will strike a deal with you, Esam started, trying to clear her throat. Her voice croaked as though she'd lost it. Tell Ephraim your story first, and I'll finance his trip to Ecom to interrogate the boy and then leave him to choose which case he'll take. How cruel of you. Mike staggered to his feet and muttered a profanity. That's the deal. You can take it or leave it, Esam said, searching his face. Mike, I think it's fair. The only reason Esam came today was just to try and convince you I'm not taking the deal. Either you give that boy a chance or we bust it. And please don't come back here unless you're ready to help that boy. He started to walk away. What do you think that boy would do if he heard about this deal? Esam asked quietly. Mike stopped in his tracks. And your response? Don't blame this on me, lady. Mike turned to face her angrily. Then give the deal a go, she smiled softly. It fluttered him and he looked away sharply. Do you want to start right away? No. Mike touched a hand gently to his forehead as though he had a saw there and looked at the door. I'll start next week. But please visit that boy before you return next week. His name is Ekpenyong. Ekpenyong. We will locate him and see you same time next week, Effiam said triumphantly. Thank you. Esam looked at him solemnly. He wondered why she thanked him as he walked back to his cell. He wondered what was in all this for her, why she took it so passionately. He hoped for more than what he thought could be for him. Let's take a break. When we come back, I'll read chapter 10. And I'm going to do something because I feel so embarrassed that this live thing is messing around with me. So I'm going to schedule a reading for later today. I'll probably do maybe chapter 11 and 12 later in the day, maybe 5 p.m. Eastern, 4 p.m. or 5 p.m. Eastern, or maybe 3 p.m. Eastern like we did yesterday. Then I will figure it out quickly. I will make sure I figure it out quickly. Note what I did that brought me to this live thing. Because how can I go and be watching how to start your live video after you schedule it? I don't want to go and be watching those videos, all right? So, okay. So also, please, let me put this in a comment real quick. I'm sorry. Yes, so I'm going to start the chat. We are reading. Let me know what you think. Thank you. All right, so I just put that real quick. I'm liking it myself, liking my own. Sorry, I'm playing around with this a bit so that I'll get better at it. But yeah, we can come back right now. That little 1 minute, 2 minute break is just to drink water, to use the bathroom, and let's do chapter 10. Chapter 10. The news is not very good. If you looked at Mike for a brief minute and sighed. Your boy has definitely been set up by very influential people. I couldn't even confirm his location. Maybe they've killed him, Mike groaned. He felt shaken. The sob escaped his lips before he knew it. He thought he'd seen the worst life had to offer. 1 week was too short to find him, but I have one of my boys on the case. Listen, Mike, let's get down to your story. No, it's no use. Listen to me. Ephraim snapped impatiently. I don't know what it is between you and my sister-in-law, but listen and listen well. If I leave here today without your cooperation, you won't see me again. And that's not a threat. That boy may not have another chance at justice, but you do, Ephraim said. You don't know a thing about my life. How dare you come here giving me orders about my life? Mike shouted back. You're right. I don't know a hoot about you, and get this straight into your skinny skull. None of my efforts is for you. I'm doing this for Esam. I don't blame you. Have you ever had it tough in your life? Ever been above and then below? Mike's face dropped into his palms. There were old handcuff scars around his wrists. Tell me about it, Ephraim prompted. For Esam, please. For Esam. Mike looked at him, feeling uncomfortable about the admission. He couldn't see what anyone could do about his case. There was no case, really. He had pleaded guilty and had been sentenced accordingly, but since they were so desperate to hear his story, he would indulge them. Thank you. Well, it was Saturday and my kids had a birthday party to attend. Sandra dropped them off at the party and went off to the salon to do her hair. I usually go to club on Saturdays. I walk in the morning, play tennis in the early evening, and then go out with my friends. Following my usual routine, I was with some guys drinking at about 9 p.m. when Sandra called me on my cell phone. She was screaming angrily something about the kids not being home. Well, we had not made any arrangements prior to the call. She knew my Saturdays were entirely mine. Nonetheless, I assured her I would pick the boys up and come home. I was drunk, but I figured I could drive, so I drove to the children's party place and picked them up. My 1 year old was asleep. My 5 year old was awake and very upset with me. I laid the little one on the back seat and my older boy sat beside me. We were on the freeway and I was on top speed. The last thing I remember were full lights in my eyes. My headlights, my head was light with the effects of alcohol and I had a big bang. I woke up in the hospital. My 5 year old had died instantly. My 1 year old was in a coma. The other driver in the head on collision had also died instantly. Tell me about the suit, Effiam said somberly. The state sued me for manslaughter due to voluntary drunk driving. I was told by my counsel that if I pleaded guilty, the sentence would be reduced. We all got the shock of our lives when I was given the maximum sentence. I'm going to be here for the rest of my life. Case closed. Mike said grimly. He'd not want to recount. It was like scrubbing open old wounds. The pain in his heart was unbearable. Well, I'm glad your plea was guilty. The first thing is to change the plea to not guilty, Effiam said, taking some notes on his laptop. Mike thought he was being ridiculous. If that does not work, we'll appeal. That may be hard, though. Was the case tried in Lagos? He asked. Yes, Mike replied. Was he ready to go through all this legal stuff again? I'm going to apply that the case be brought here to Calabar, or even preferably Abuja. They treated it like a federal offense or as though you were a political prisoner. Was the accident on a federal road? You're crazy, Mike blurted out. There were voices in his head and he couldn't think straight. He wasn't sure he wanted to go through a trial. Femi, his lawyer, had told him that a trial could last forever and drain him of all his wealth, and he would still end up behind bars for the rest of his life. What is your lawyer's name? And when did this incident occur? Effiam, you're crazy. I won't go through this. It's futile. Answer me. Femi Williams. SAN? Yes. And the accident occurred 4 years ago, September 8, 2001. He could never forget. You were sentenced when? The following week, about 10 days later. I really can't remember. The following, what? Case was wrapped up horridly. If you made a note of that. What happened to your second son? He recovered. Now we are going to take this from the top. I'm going to appeal the sentence and file for a change of plea based on misguided counsel. Femi is a SAN, an SAN. Are you? I guess not. He's also my very personal friend. I'm instrumental to his success in life and career. He gave you the worst. He's also my wife's cousin. Are you going to challenge the wealth of experience and intelligence of an SAN? What have you to offer that can best a pro? You cooperate with me and your questions will be answered. Ephraim said softly. In his heart, he felt a victory already. This would definitely be a big leap in his career. He had to choose the location of the new trial carefully. The press, he will spend his life's earnings to get the press. I can't be your guinea pig. CM1106, time up. The warden called out suddenly. I'll see you next week. Ephraim started to close the file on his laptop. Please do something about Ephraim before then. Mike pleaded as he stood up. Let's pray something good comes out of it. Ephraim replied and smiled as the prisoner was led away. I never pray, he beat out over his shoulder. That is the end of chapter 10. I am going to schedule another live reading today. Okay? I'll schedule that live reading for 3 p.m. Eastern. Okay? And forgive me if I'm a few minutes late again because I'm going to crack this thing. I'm not going to go watch a YouTube video on how to do this. I will crack it myself. Thank you once again for listening to the reading. We'll be reading maybe 2 more chapters later today. And see you then. Go put it on your schedule too. 3 p.m. Eastern. I like that time. 3 p.m. Eastern. We'll be back. Bye. End stream.